So welcome everyone to this Cabinet meeting. Welcome fellow Cabinet members, councillors and members of the public. I'll be chairing the meeting today in the absence of the Mayor. Just a reminder to everyone to observe social distancing and to wear a mask whilst moving around the room unless you're exempt from doing so. You are not required to wear a mask when speaking. As usual, the agenda papers and public forum submissions are available on the Council's website. Agenda item 18, Ambition Community Energy Wind Turbine, is included under APR 15 as a general exception because although it was published with the other papers, it is not listed on the forward plan as a key decision 28 days prior to this meeting. I can confirm the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Management Board and the relevant Scrutiny Commission have been notified of this. The following agenda items contain exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of the appendix will need to be held in exempt session. Cabinet members and members of the relevant Scrutiny Commission have been given access to these appendices. That's agenda item 18, Ambition Community Energy Wind Turbine, and agenda item 19, the Bedminster Green Framework Area. Agenda item 21, Confidential Legal Report, contains information in respect of which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings and is therefore exempt. Cabinet members have had access to the report, but it cannot be shared with relevant Scrutiny members until after the Cabinet meeting, and Scrutiny members have been made aware of this. The report will be considered in an exempt session as the last item of business, and Cabinet members will adjourn to the bearer room. Press and public will be excluded from the meeting at this point, but any other member of Council who wishes to observe the discussion can do so. The decision needs to be actioned immediately, as any delay likely to be caused by the call-in process would seriously prejudice the Council. The Monitoring Officer and Chief Executive, in consultation with the Mayor, have agreed that given the circumstances and for reasons of urgency, it would be reasonable that this decision is not subject to call-in. On to housekeeping items. Can I please draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is outlined in the agenda and is currently being displayed on the screen. Thank you. Also to remind you that the meeting is being webcast, so please speak into the microphone to ensure you are clearly heard. Agenda item 2, public forum. This is just a reminder that statements and questions will be taken at the time the relevant agenda item is discussed. I will reply to questions or ask the relevant Cabinet member to respond. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. The only one I have is Mayor Marvin Rees, who is in Glasgow representing Bristol at COP26, and Nicola Beach, who I think is going to leave at 6 but doesn't appear to be here at the moment. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any interests to be declared? No? Brilliant. Agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There are none on this occasion. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There is an item from Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on performance reports, and Councillor Jeff Gollop is here to present them. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Craig. As you know, this is a cross-party statement from all members of Overview and Scrutiny Management. On our meeting on the 18th of October, we looked at the performance indicators, and we've made some comments and recommendations which we'd like to share with Cabinet members in the hope that we can find a way of constructively engaging debate between scrutiny commissions and the relevant members. So I'm just going to summarise the allocation that we came up with. Performance indicator referred to the Community Scrutiny Commission was BPC 541, which is the increase in the percentage of household waste sent for use, recycling and composting. I'm sure everybody agrees that's a key indicator, and it's one that we'd like to work out how we can engage in discussion and review of that in a way that would be helpful. To the People's Scrutiny Commission, particularly important, BPB 225E increased the percentage of final EHCPs issued within 20 weeks, excluding exception cases, and 222 increased the take-up of free early educational entitlement by eligible 2-year-olds, and 528 increased the percentage of employment offers made to people living in the 10% most deprived areas. To the Growth and Regen Commission, the percentage of residential planning applications processed within 13 weeks. WIS referred to communities, CRR 42, provision of leisure centres. To People's Scrutiny, CRR 9, safeguarding vulnerable children. And to Growth and Regen, CRR 32, failure to deliver enough affordable homes to meet the city's needs. And 41, long-term major capital projects. So just to repeat, the chairs would really welcome discussion with Cabinet members, because we'd rather we were pursuing things that were part of a joint approach rather than simply asking questions about them. So thank you for that.
Brilliant, thanks Jeff, and I'm sure all Cabinet members are more than willing to engage in that. And thanks to all members of Scrutiny for their work in coming up with that.
Thank you.
So next, there's an item from Resources Scrutiny Committee on the MTFP, which I think is also you, Jeff.
It is indeed. And I'm sorry, Craig, we were actually quite complimentary about you, and if I'd realised you were chairing, I'd have toned it down a bit. But I'd start off by saying members wanted to put on record thanks to Denise Murray, Director of Finance, to Michael Pilcher, Glenn Hammonds, and the finance team for their openness, professionalism and clarity on such complex issues. And we did want to thank you for allowing that level of engagement and openness, which is a really constructive way for backbenchers to work with finance officers and is a really positive form of engagement and scrutiny. Officers talked us through the underlying pressures and assumptions within the medium-term financial plan and the thinking behind the capital strategy, and we had a number of specific comments. Inevitably, members expressed concerns about the size of the gap and the pressure created by so many uncertainties in the planning stage of developing the budget. Given the decline in government funding, members also recognised the pressures officers are under to repeatedly deliver savings. The comments that followed are based on views expressed by the group. This is the medium-term financial plan task and finish group, and they're intended, and I hope they are constructive. We noted the gap was made to look worse by increasing reserves by £5 million over and above the already increased level, and also by aiming for maximum borrowing to ensure that interest was at 10% of the net revenue budget. Members noted there was significant uncertainty about some in-year savings for the current year. If these cannot be realised, it raises concern about the achievability of additional future savings. In terms of the dedicated schools grant, concern was expressed about the growing deficit, and in particular questions of whether the special educational needs and disabilities costs can be accurate with so many EHCPs outstanding. Also questions of whether the MTFP itself allows for staffing costs to remedy the EHCP delays, which would impact on the general fund. We note there has been an historic underfunding of SEND. In terms of social care, the published document does not provide so much information on social care spending pressures as members of the group received in private briefings. But we believe that 50% of the overall gap is attributable to social care. We understand the pandemic has made the position worse, but it reflects a trend that has already been well established pre-pandemic. We asked if all the options for use of technology and best practice to maximise efficiency in service delivery have been utilised, and whether there is any more opportunity for Invest to Save by accelerating changes in the way that services are delivered. There were also comments on the different demographic groups now requiring social care support and how this may affect pressures on current allocations in budget. We move on to the capital strategy, and members particularly welcomed the clarity of the capital strategy and the new plan on capital projects. It was felt the reduction of slippage was important as it improves efficiency and should reduce maintenance costs. We noted the Invest to Grow, Maintain and Save split in the ratio of 73, 18, 9. But we think the headings and the percentages need further consideration that could lead to reprioritisation. And we looked at that firstly in terms of climate change. We'd like to see an indication of the proportion that will contribute to decarbonisation. And secondly, the proportion that will contribute to tackling the effects of climate change, floods, heat waves, etc. We consider those to be key parameters and potentially more important than the simple grow, maintain and invest headings. We'd like to know the proportion relating to decarbonisation and the proportion on mitigation and adaptation, with a commentary on whether it was considered satisfactory. It was suggested that it would be helpful if in future years there could be a parallel carbon budget attached to each project and departmental budget, but we were realistic enough to not be suggesting that that was a requirement for this year, just looking ahead. Given the financial pressures, we were surprised the level of spend on invest to save and invest to main projects are so low. Surely priority should be given to more projects that cut costs. For example, spend on technology to improve social care efficiency, spend on accommodation to reduce temporary housing costs, or funding extensions for foster carers to enable them to take more children, are just examples that could contribute to reducing costs. We also note that commercialisation no longer features in the medium-term financial plan. We recognise this may not be an appropriate term, but we do believe this area needs to be prioritised and alternative ways of delivering services need to be explored as a matter of urgency. We're disappointed there's no apparent attempt to highlight activities that should develop a mechanism for investing in innovation or service delivery that could lead to more effective cost recovery. Members did also question whether there was sufficient capacity within the officer teams to develop and introduce ways of dealing with the ever-increasing challenges faced by the Council. In conclusion, we of course recognise we can't do justice to the massive amount of work that has gone into producing the full medium-term financial plan report, and it's possible and impossible for us to grasp and comment on all the many complex issues that the MTFP has to deal with, especially as the full implication of the budget announcement and further government announcements are still to emerge. But I just conclude by repeating grateful thanks for a really positive contribution from the finance team in all this. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I probably, without getting all patting each other on the back about this, so I would probably comment that the kind of MTFP and budget task and finish scrutiny groups I think are excellent and have been every year and add huge value to the Council. So I just comment on that. In terms of, I think if you haven't already, you will receive an update on some of those numbers today from Denise, because we did some work yesterday afternoon, Marvin, myself and the exec team on some of those issues that you've raised actually. So you should see some new slides coming out today if you haven't already on some of that. But thank you. Okay, so that's the end of agenda item 6. Over to agenda item 7, Chair's business. I did want to just pass some comment on the budget that the Chancellor laid out last week. There has been an increased allocation for the government, but there still hasn't been a commitment on a multi-year settlement which would lock in the figures and provide some of the funding certainty that we seek. The autumn budget has funding to help councils in their efforts to support people at risk of rough sleeping and homelessness. Announcements of capital investment in skills, transport, house building and the provision of school places for children with special educational needs and disabilities are also all positive. However, we remain concerned that money allocated to social care from the health and care levy in the early years will be insufficient to fund reforms. The Chancellor announced a package of funding targeting education recovery, but we're still awaiting the review of the SEND system and the element of this increased funding which will provide councils and schools with long-term certainty to meet the needs of children with SEND and resolve the DSG deficits. This above will not meet all the extra cost and demand pressure to provide services at today's levels. Following our review of the autumn budget and the MTFP assumptions, we estimate that the funding gap for 22-23 has reduced to 23.1 million and the MTFP will be refreshed to reflect this for council. This remains a significant challenge for the coming year and we have very difficult choices ahead. I look forward to working with other groups to agree a budget that supports our inclusive and sustainable agenda for the city whilst protecting key services. With such a significant challenge, the budget cannot be balanced without additional funding. In our budget consultation starting next week, we will seek views on the proposed increase in council tax, social care precepts and some of the broad options we are looking at to reduce council spend. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities will publish the provisional local government finance settlement for 22-23 by mid-December 2021, with the aim to ensure that councils have the information they need for budget planning and the deployment of resources. Also, I just want to take a moment to welcome Jeff Farrar, the newly appointed chair of the Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire ICS Integrated Care System, which are the changed NHS arrangements. We as a council have been working hard with our partners across health and the voluntary sector to establish the ICS across the city. It's good to know that Jeff has reached out to partners in the new integrated care system to come and see us and hear our challenges. Welcome, Jeff, and we look forward to continue to build those relationships. So now over to the main agenda. Agenda item 8, We Work for Everyone project. Can I ask Councillor Helen Holland to introduce the report?
Thanks very much, Craig, and I'm really thrilled to bring this report because it's a project that I've championed for a long time, and we did have a report earlier, I think, when we put the bid in to the European Social Fund for this money. It was a successful bid. Overall, it's about a £4 million project, with 2.2 million of that coming from Europe, over £1 million from WECA, and the rest from other partners. And why is it important to do this, and why is it particularly important? Because we put the bid in long before the pandemic. It is shocking, isn't it, that only approximately 6% of people with learning disabilities are in employment, and that's a huge waste of the potential of those people, and also, of course, means that there's additional costs, because we have to find ways of looking after those people where they're not having their lives fulfilled. So it's something that I've been passionate about. I used to work in this field, so you can understand that I've got an ongoing passion for it. And I think that the really important thing about this project is that the awareness of it is gradually growing. There's a huge list of employers who were working with us on the project. And that's especially important at a time like now, when when there are shortages in workforce areas, and there are some which are absolutely perfect for people with learning disabilities. That's not to pigeonhole people, but there are some jobs that are very much ones that they are supported and encouraged to take. And I think the other thing is about the knowledge of the project, getting out to our social workers when they're reviewing people's packages, making sure that they're directing them to the pathway for We Work for Everyone, if that's suitable, because it is a very, very supported environment. So it would be about helping people find an appropriate job. It would be about helping them with getting there on the bus if they're not confident about travelling by themselves, being with them when they first start in that workplace, and also being there if the employers have any problems at all, being on call, those navigators, of providing really useful services. I could go into detail about some of the great case studies we've already got on this, but this report, as we've said, is about making sure that we can spend the rest of the money. Our partners in WECA are also involved in the project, but I think probably, if I'm allowed to say this, that we're playing the most proactive role in really establishing it as part of how we work with people with learning disabilities. Unfortunately, Tim Rippington put some questions in and he's not here, but I'll get him the answers to those. But I would say on the back of that one of the things that employers do come back to us is that the level of loyalty of those people when they've got jobs to their firms. So we know that a lot of firms spend a lot of money training people, and then they go out of the door and go somewhere else with those skills. But the loyalty that these people have once they've got a job is really tremendous, and is actually saving firms money because they're not having to retrain people. So it's a great project. I'm a huge champion of it, and we need to just get it out there.
Great, thanks, Helen. So in terms of public forum and statements, we've received one statement and two questions on this item. Excuse me. The statement is from Councillor Lorraine Francis. I didn't see Lorraine, is she here? No? Well, Cabinet have received and read the statement anyway. We had two questions from Tim Rippington, but Helen, I think you just said that Tim's not going to be able to make it, so we'll move on from there. Can I open it up to Cabinet members? Do any Cabinet members want to comment? Asha?
Hi, yes, I welcome this report, and as Councillor Holland stated, disabled people make up 6%. Well, they don't make up 6%, it's 15%, because I listened to a very impassioned speech yesterday by the 15% at COP yesterday, and about how disabled people are being left behind. So, and given my new role around education and skills, I think this is really, really important. I know that internally within the organisation, we also need to look at how we can increase the number of disabled people who work with us in our own organisation, and I'm hoping that other public sector partners will follow and do the same, because I think that's what is needed after doing all of this, the support and training and skilling up. We need to make sure that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I urge all employers to really take proactive approach to employing disabled people through this programme. So thanks for championing this work, Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Asha. There's a stepping up type issue as well here, isn't there? Where it's about layers within the council and councillors and so on as well that they're not represented. So, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on this one? Nicola?
Thanks, Craig. Just to lend my support to this as well, as a very close family member of mine is an adult with learning disabilities and has a job in a pub in the kitchen, has got his MVQ in being a KP basically, and absolutely loves his job. And I'd love to see Martin continue to progress sort of in hospitality. And so when I hear things like this and when you talk about kind of the untapped potential of thousands of adults in our city alone, let alone sort of a national picture, you can just see the benefits all around. And I also think it makes employers more compassionate. I think there's a real piece about the workplace and actually how people treat one another in the workplace. And as people return to work from COVID, kind of actually when you think about it from being a disability confidence perspective, it actually can transform what a workplace does, and that helps retention beyond the people who are potentially adults with learning difficulty. So I just think it's a brilliant scheme. So thanks, Helen.
Great, thanks, Nicola. Anyone else? No? Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for your comments. I'll now hand back to Councillor Holland to take the decision, which I support and will be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Craig. So in terms of the decision, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Helen. Agenda item 9, recommissioning of carer support services, is back to you.
Yep, me again. Well, in presenting this report, the first thing we've got to say is a thank you to unpaid carers in the city. We know that there are thousands of them. There are thousands of them that are known to the support organisations that work with them, but there are also, sadly, thousands who don't reach out for that support. And thank God that they do what they do, because if all of those people were to turn up at our front door asking for support, the issues that you've already talked about, Craig, and we're going to talk about later in the agenda about our budget, would be even more decimated than it is now. So the work of the organisations that support carers is absolutely key in the city. And some of the things that you will have seen that this report does is that we, in discussion, recognise that there was a lot of disparity really between the support for young carers, carers of children and adult carers and carers of adults. And so one of the things that this report does is that we're going to recommission it. There's now an all-age carers strategy, so that there is that seamlessness from being either a child carer who grows up but still has those caring responsibilities, or people who are caring for children and who then grow up. Because if you talk to carers organisations, the big fear is about what happens when my child is 18 and everything sort of, to their eyes, falls away. It doesn't, because there are some fantastic organisations, but it's about signposting that. So it's now an all-age carer strategy, and obviously the commissioning falls out of that strategy. We brought this strategy to the Health and Wellbeing Board recently, and it was really, really very warmly received, especially, I mean, Jeff will be pleased to hear this, that we've got the localities, the integrated care partnerships. We've got 3 in Bristol. They're now represented on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and that discussion between the locality reps about how they would take that forward in their areas was a very live one. So, of course, we need to recommission the services. The report does say that there's an amount in it at the moment, but as the contract goes through, we reach out to more of those people who aren't at the moment supported by those organisations. That may need to grow, but it's a very, very vital part of the service. And as I say, a huge thank you to those people who take on unpaid caring responsibilities.
Thanks, Helen. We've had no public forum statements or questions on this item. Do any Cabinet members wish to comment? No? I mean, I'd probably just comment on that. The point you made about the transition from kind of young to older care is such a problematic area that resolving that kind of all-age carers piece is just hugely important. So Thank you. And now over to you to take the decision, which will be displayed on the screen.
So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Helen. So agenda item 10, the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. I will introduce this report. The medium-term financial plan and capital strategy are integrated and key parts of the Council's policy and budget framework and financial planning process. They are rolling plans that set out the Council's strategic approach to the management of its finances and provide a framework within which the delivery of the Council's priorities can be progressed and sustainability achieved over the medium term. The refresh of the MTFP covers the periods 2022-23 to 2026-27 and considers the financial outlook for the Council over the 5 years after considering changes in national and local context which may impact on the Council, ongoing financial uncertainty associated to post-COVID-19 recovery, delays to local government funding reforms, saving measures agreed in the past year not delivered, emerging demand pressures, growth and opportunities. Based on known funding levels, the MTFP identified a 22-23 funding gap in the General Fund of 41.2 million and DSG of 35.8, subject to the outcome of the spending review and autumn budget. As outlined earlier, following our review of the outcome of the spending review, autumn budget and MTFP assumptions, we estimate that the General Fund funding gap for 22-23 will reduce to 23.1 million, and under delegation, the MTFP will be refreshed to reflect this position to Council. There remains a significant challenge for the coming year, and Bristol is not alone. The local picture in Bristol reflects the national one in terms of the challenges facing the public sector. Care provider services for adults and children, mental health support, and the increasing number of children with special educational needs and disabilities continues to rise due to factors such as increasing demand, complexity of need, internal and external capacity, and market stability issues in the independent sector. We hope the breakdown of the new DSG allocations will follow in a timely manner and bring some positive news for the DSG. The budget strategy sets out a range of measures to close the gap and principles for how we spend, invest and be more efficient, and the report also sets out principles for a robust reserves policy to ensure resilience over the period, all of which still stand. The capital strategy covers the period 22-23 to 2031-32 and details the high-level approach and framework that will underpin the development of the capital programme. It sets out the governance framework required to ensure the capital programme can be delivered and in a balanced way will support the delivery of the Council's objectives, key issues and risks that will impact on the delivery of the programme, and all that capital investment remains sustainable, and that's all capital investment remains sustainable and affordable. The reports have been prepared in compliance with the relevant codes, and in developing the financial outlook, various assumptions have been made. These are modelling and planning assumptions which will be kept under constant review as we develop our revenue budgets and capital programme for Council. So on to public forum statements and questions. We have received one public forum question from Councillor Heather Mack.
Hello, thank you. My question is around the capital strategy. I'm a big fan of capital strategy. You'll hear me talking about it a lot. The strategy refers to addressing the balance between invest to grow, invest to maintain and invest to save, given the ongoing, way beyond next year, pressures of on social care, adult and child social care. My view is we must really focus on both the invest to save and the invest to maintain, which is at about, invest to save, it's about 9% at the moment. It's really low, or we won't be able to afford our necessary statutory services. Can we make any commitment about what redressing that balance looks like?
I think so. There's a couple of things. One, there's quite a lot of debate internally about what investing for sustainable growth is. That actually an invest to save? In some senses, a lot of it is. You know, investing in a healthy workforce or a strong workforce reduces other calls on services, council tax reduction or other things. So I think there's a bit of work that we need to do on making sure we've correctly allocated those things in the right way. In some ways, there are a lot of things within the invest to grow are actually also saving us money and maintaining things. So there's a discussion to be had about that. In terms of reallocating things, I guess the Council sets the capital programme, so we will need to have a discussion. So firstly, we'll need to review the capital programme and then have a discussion about the things that come out of the programme, because unless we do take the extra 2.4 million in revenue costs of topping up the amount we borrow, we can't put anything else in without taking something out. So there needs to be a whole reprioritisation process, which will come through the budget process rather than through the MTFP. So I wouldn't want to set a target today for fear of, you know, not being quite clear on a lot of those details. That said, we are absolutely agreed with the concept. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I feel like that was a little bit pushing back. I think the question was about, in the strategy, we're talking about redressing a balance, but not quite maybe being brave enough, being definite enough to say what redressing looks like and maybe putting targets on that. And you're saying, well, that can be part of the budget process, and I agree, but I feel like that is something that could be discussed and agreed at the strategy point and not when it comes to the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a lack of bravery. I think it's that we haven't spent the time to review the entire capital programme and decide what things we would reprioritise in it yet, and to set a target that was arbitrary and hadn't factored in that those details would be that would be brave. Actually, I think that would be more brave than I think I'd be confident in being at the moment, because we'd only end up failing, and that would be, not helpful particularly. Yeah, thank you. So I think that concludes the public forum on this item. Is that right? Brilliant. Yeah, great. Do any cabinet members want to comment? No? Okay, thanks. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report, and which should now be displayed on the screen. Next up, Corporate Strategy 22 to 27. I'll also introduce this item. The paper asks Cabinet to approve the final draft of the Corporate Strategy 2022 to 2027 and its recommendation for approval by full Council. The Council is bringing forward this strategy as we look to meet the considerable challenges and opportunities our city faces over the next 5 years. It sets out our vision and priorities for the years ahead as we continue to adjust to more than a decade of austerity imposed by central government, the changes we are seeing as a result of Brexit, and of course the urgent need to secure an inclusive recovery from COVID-19. The overarching vision of the strategy is that the Council will play a leading role in driving an inclusive, sustainable and healthy city of hope and aspiration, one where everyone can share in its success. The strategy is aligned with the One City Plan and is structured around 5 cross-cutting principles to influence how the Council plans and operates. They are development and delivery, equality and inclusion, resilience, environmental sustainability and world-class employment. I'd like to ask Cabinet to approve the final draft strategy, which provides the roadmap for how we will deliver on the commitments we've made to this city for this administration and beyond. So we have received 1 statement and 2 public forum questions on this item. The statement is from Rail Future Sevenside. I think that's you, David.
I'll do the statement first. I think we have concerns. We met in Gloucestershire to go through this very carefully. And I think our concerns really are that it's a good strategy, but we should have targets. And if we're to deliver, say, rail services, then it's not really at the City Council's gift. It is down to working in partnership with Network Rail, with the Department for Transport, as we know from the Porter's headline, working with certainly the Metro Mayor and the West Midlands Combined Authority, and then with the train operating companies. And we also have on the horizon Great Britain's Railways, which is a new government quango, which will take control of the railways. We may get a branch office in Bristol, we may not, or leave Wecker to fight the corner. But really, if we're going to say to the public out there, this is what we're going to deliver for transport, and Marvin keeps saying we've got to deliver, not write plans, and I agree with Marvin, absolutely, then I just
10 seconds left, David.
Relook at this and make sure that we show the delivery agencies, show what we're actually doing through Bus Back Better and the bus services improvement plan with the government, and actually what our targets are and what we're actually going to be able to address and tell the travelling public out there in the West Midlands Combined Authority and North Somerset, which of course needs to join Wecker, what we actually can deliver in the way the other Metro mayors have. So welcome it, but please can we have a look at it in terms of delivery and actually getting it on the ground, because I'm not here to write plans which say wish lists of stations and wish lists of bus services. That's all I would say.
Thanks, David. And you also, I think it was your question as well.
Yeah, the question is the same, really. It's, I suppose that there's 2 points I want to make on the questions. One is about delivery of the services and asking, really, has this been costed? Have we had discussions with Network Rail on the rail side, with the Department for Transport? Because we've seen what they've done with the Porter's headline, and I'm very grateful to work Kevin Slogan's trying to do to rescue it with Dan Norris, but we're stuck, and we need to bring those routes in, and we need timescales and delivery. And that's not what the City Council necessarily has control of. So making that, and on the buses, of course, it's Bus Back Better. It's the government saying what we can spend on buses from April next year. And you know the big debate there with the Metro Mayor. So I really would like clear plans and clear direction and clear partnership. On the South Bristol Loop and Metro bus, Well, I'm delighted as further in the report we've got the item on the North Bristol Loop, and we're pressing ahead with Wecker and the Metromere and South Gloucestershire. But I've got to remind everybody, including my friend Karen Smith and Richard Eddy, says cross-party, Tim and everybody else, that we've been trying to get the South Bristol Loop in operation. It's a key target in South Bristol. It's about social inclusion, regeneration. It's about giving the poorer people of the city access to employment, the point that Helen made, and about access to services. And I just really think we had an opportunity here to insist that if Toby wants his North Bristol fringe, and I'm happy with that, no problems, Toby Savage, leader of South Gloss, that we actually should be pressing hard to get that service in South Bristol up and operating and doing social inclusion and regeneration, the kinds of things that Asher, Craig and Helen have just mentioned about. So, and also I'd like to say, can I just finally say on transport, one for Asher, really, but we've got to have access to the railway stations. We can't have stations in the city with no access, and we need to have those disabled platforms and the issues addressed. And I think that's important. And also, Portway Park and Ride, when is it actually going to be delivered? When are we going to have the borders? Yeah, exactly. This is why we need a plan, I'm saying to the Chief Executive, which, with the Wacker Chief Executive, that's deliverable, and we can hold Network Rail's feet to the fire, because that's what we need to do. I'm the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Right, thanks, David. I mean, on your point about on what we include in the corporate strategy, I guess listing every possible plan for every possible service that we deliver it'll become a massively unwieldy document. So whilst they are really helpful points, I don't necessarily think they sit in the corporate strategy. That said, we do need to have plans. Don, I don't know if you want to come in on the questions specifically.
I think, Dave's points are well made, comprehensive as ever. I felt like a lot of them should have been addressed to the West of England Mayor, and perhaps were. But I accept the challenge. The fact that we haven't put targets in there, you correctly identify that, because a lot of this is partnership working. But don't mistake the lack of targets for a lack of ambition and a lack of stuff going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of ambition from us here, and a lot of work going in on this side. But as you said, we are working with other people, and the Portway Park and Ride, as you said, is exactly an example of how challenging it can be.
Did you have a supplementary, David? Thanks, David, as always. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they wish to comment? Yeah, Tom?
I really welcome this document and the strategy it outlines. I think it shows the scale of the ambition that we have actually for the city, and I really welcome how we've linked it into the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well, and thinking about how we're reflecting those and all the work that we're doing, and some of the the many key themes that are golden threads around equality and inclusion, thinking about environmental impact as well. And as you won't be surprised here, sort of thinking about homes and communities in particular, I'm really pleased with where we've got the final outcome to be. And I think for us is, this is a statement of intent as much as anything, isn't it? The detail's going to follow on a lot of these things later, and certainly for the housing brief, I'll be bringing many Cabinet reports forwards in the coming months to set out exactly how we'll be dealing with those particular issues.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. Asher?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on David's point around inclusion and accessibility across the rail network, and that's something that I can have a conversation with the likes of Network Rail and others in conjunction with Don as he leads on transport. But I don't necessarily underestimate, it's 2021, in terms of particularly with new stations coming on board, the new Temple Meads entrance, I'm expecting to see gold star-plated accessible options available for disabled people and others. But it's something I'm quite happy to take up and talk to Wecker in conjunction with Don.
Thanks, Asher. Anyone else wish to comment? Yeah, Nicola?
I'll just very quickly come in just to say, like Tom, really, I really like the way that this corporate strategy leans into some of the challenges that sit in my portfolio, but also doesn't pretend that they're not hard. I think, as we kind of come to terms with what the climate and ecological emergency mean for us as an organisation, this strategy is ambitious in what we need to do and doesn't pretend that that's easy. And so I think from my perspective, kind of what follows now is really, given sort of my work stream and us as an administration that mandate to sort of work with Mike and the senior team and actually say, right, this is how we need to pivot as an organisation. And it also helps us recognise that other major partners in the city, NHS, university, they're going through that same challenge. And so there's an honesty to this, which I think is really important. And I think if we're not, or if we're disingenuous about the scale of that challenge, that doesn't actually help anybody, because it won't get the outcome we want, and it also kind of will ultimately overpromise and fail to deliver. And so I've really enjoyed the involvement in this, and I think that I hope that our city partners will kind of look at the work we're doing and sort of join us on that journey, and we are already seeing that around pesticide use. So I take kind of a lot of hope from this piece of work. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, thanks, Nicola. And also we should thank and acknowledge the work of the cross-party working group that worked to develop this with the policy team. So thanks to them too. Does anyone else want to comment before? Oh, Helen, yeah.
Just a quick point. I mean, you've already said that a lot of this is to be delivered in partnership with organisations, so it's good that Jeff's here because there's a specific mention of the implementation of the integrated care system and how we want that to really transform both the way that care is delivered, but also the outcomes, obviously, for people who suffer the greatest health inequalities. So, this is the City Council's part of the overall picture for Bristol, but it's important that we get partners alongside us to deliver it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Helen. Okay, well, I thank everyone for their comments. And in terms of decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report, and which will now be displayed on the screen. Agenda item 12, Council Tax Reduction Scheme 2022 to 2023. Bristol's Council Tax Reduction Scheme currently supports just under 36,000 low-income households, of which 25,325 are working-age households at a cost of £42.3 million. Following the abolition of council tax benefit in 2013, all local authorities in England were tasked to design their own working age scheme whilst pensioners were protected by a centrally determined scheme. Bristol is one of less than 40 councils and the only core city to provide assistance up to 100% of a household's council tax liability, with 19,452 households receiving maximum assistance. Costs for 22-23 are estimated to be £45.6 million based on a 1.99% increase in council tax and no increase in the pension age caseload, but a small increase, 2.5%, in the working age caseload. But other scenarios have been estimated within the report. Reasons for maintaining the current system include protection for the most vulnerable and deprived household, reducing debt in those areas of the city where debt is already high and is against the backdrop of successive welfare cuts and reductions in some parts of universal credit and an increased cost of living. Therefore, our recommendation for the 2022-23 is to keep Bristol's council tax reduction scheme as it is. We have received 3 questions on this item. The first 2 are from Councillor Steve Pearce. Steve, can you ask your first question?
Thanks, Craig. The administration has had a lot of ambitions and achieved many, and there are more in sight. But when it comes to people being able to afford to continue to live, the council tax reduction scheme is perhaps one of the things that this administration can be most proud of. So how much has the scheme saved someone on universal credit since its introduction?
So unfortunately, we can't actually work that out. We just don't have the statistics to be able to back it up. But there are currently 11,421 households who receive council tax reduction based on universal credit, with an average council tax reduction award of £21.26 per week. That equates to an average household receiving £1,105 per annum in support, which equates to £12.6 million in support for those on universal credit each year. Have a supplementary?
Yeah, would it be possible to extract those numbers from the data that we've got?
Possibly. I'll talk to the team and see what we can come up with. The risk is that we come up with something that's nonsense, or is so caveated that it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a sensible number, yeah, then it's as well to not expend resource on it.
But I'll give you the numbers I've just mentioned anyway, because they are valuable numbers themselves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Can I now move to your second question?
Yeah. How many core cities have maintained the 100% reduction rate?
We are the only one, yeah. So we are proud to be the only city that continues to maintain the council tax reduction scheme at 100%. it is our biggest area of non-discretionary spend in the whole council.
That's rather spoiled my supplementary, because I was going to ask what those authorities had in common, but apparently it's only us then. Are you suitably proud of that? That would be my supplementary.
As I said loads of times before, and I apologise, I as someone who grew up and received council tax benefit, the precursor to this in our house, it was like life-saving in some way. So, absolutely proud to keep it going as long as we can. Thanks, Steve. The next question is from Councillor Philippa Hume. Welcome. Do you want to ask your question?
Thanks, Craig. Could you provide any details, please, on the approach that the council is taking to chase council tax arrears, particularly considering the financial hardships faced by some Bristolians, particularly as a result of cuts to universal credit and COVID?
Yeah, thanks. So you may or may not know, but we rolled out an ethical debt enforcement policy a number of years ago, which was to move away from the kind of in fact, it was to move away from the use of bailiffs ultimately, and to move away from the pretty harsh process that existed before, where if you failed to pay and didn't respond to a reminder, you've got a full year's bill and 2 weeks later or something. So we're continuing with that approach. We will start to issue reminder letters soon-ish, because there is a risk that people are building up debts that they'll never be able to pay back. So we're getting to that point now where we need to start letting people know that that at some point we will have to come up with a payment plan of some kind. So that will be starting soon. We'll essentially be issuing quite a soft letter that says, remember this, and then asking people to contact the council tax team to talk about a repayment plan, and then we'll be referring them on to specialist debt advice and all the things that we introduce as part of the soft collection that we do.
Brilliant, thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah. I mean, just first of all, it's really reassuring to hear about the sort of empathetic approach that the council's taking. So another thing that we can be really proud of, I think. Do you have can you estimate sort of how many low-income families this policy has benefited? Is that something?
Well, not off the top of my head, no. But we could. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could do something. I mean, we could. Yeah, I'm sure we could. We could take the sort of deprivation indices data and map it against where we've got outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's worth spending a lot of resources on it, but just, it would be a really good thing to know how many people have benefited in this way.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'd be happy to do that. Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Can I ask any other Cabinet members if they want to comment? Asher?
Yeah, I suppose I just want to follow up on what you said, Craig, about how, I'm really proud of the fact, because I remember when we made the decision to come up with the ethical policy on this. I know so many families, and I too have had the bailiffs knock on my door. It's not a nice, it's a scary situation for many, and for those who have been going through a lot of stress, particularly through COVID, loss of jobs, furlough, the whole shebang. The fact that we are taking what is a softly but a caring approach, really, because that's what we're about, a caring authority. So I welcome the continuation of the council tax reduction scheme, and so may it continue.
Thanks, Asher. Anyone else? Helen?
Well, of course we welcome this. It's a fantastic contribution, and especially when you think of how much harder people's lives are. And the thing that I always remember is, of course, that if this is money in people's pockets, or that they aren't having to find the council tax money, they're spending their money locally. That money stays in the local communities. It isn't being salted away in an offshore bank account somewhere. It's being spent in Morrison's in Hartcliffe, and that's what we need in order to keep those local services sustainable.
I mean, this is one of those cases where it is an investor save, isn't it, in some senses, Okay, great. Anyone else want to comment on it? Tom, yeah.
I think I'd just like to briefly welcome this as well. I know, how tough things are for us at the moment, and I think, it speaks volumes about our values of how we're prioritising supporting the most vulnerable within our cities, and really thinking about how we're going about supporting them as well, which I know we've also looked at within sort of the rents and council rents as well, and extending the eviction ban there for people in rent arrears. So it's something I really welcome, and I think given the climate of the universal credit uplift that's just gone, and constant problems are being generated by national government policy, it's excellent that we can do this.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Okay, in that case, I thank everyone for their comments, and in terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report, and which will now be displayed on the screen. So agenda item 13 is me again, the period 6 finance report. This report provides an update on the Council's forecast financial performance for 2021-22, the continued financial impact of the pandemic on the Council's budget, non-COVID pressures, proposed mitigations, and acceptance of new funding bids not in the previously approved budget. COVID was anticipated to create financial pressures for the Council over the medium term, and at period 6, the General Fund is forecasting a £25.4 million overspend against the approved budget. This can be broken down as a £35.5 million associated to COVID expenditure savings not delivered and income losses, offset by £10.1 million from a combination of underspends and one-off COVID grants applied directly to core-based budgets. Further COVID expenditure is currently aligned to the public health budget, taking the total COVID-related expenditure to £47.3 million. It's currently anticipated that the COVID-related expenditure will be mitigated from general COVID funding. In addition, there continue to be notable non-COVID risks. The adult social care service is heavily impacted by market volatility in relation to the availability of care staff, and negotiations regarding the Council's 21-22 pay award have still not concluded. The Council continues to look at ways to mitigate these and other pressures which could result in overspends at the end of the financial year if not mitigated in a timely manner. The P6 report also asked Cabinet for supplementary budget approvals, including the allocation of almost £2.7 million Section 256 funding towards the BNSSG Healthier Together single system plan. Full details of revenue and capital spending forecasts, new funding bids and awards are provided in the appendices to this report. So we have two public forum questions in relation to this item. The first is from Councillor Heather Mack. Heather, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, sorry, you were too quick for me. According to the medium-term financial plan, which we've already looked at, there are 5.5 million in savings are at risk without a mitigation plan, and 2 million of that could be absorbed by savings contingency, but that leaves a 3.5 million residual gap. This report suggests that all of the savings will be achieved, and I'm just a little bit confused. So both of those reports coming at the same time in the situation.
Yeah, so I think that there's a risk of double counting otherwise. So effectively, the £12 million overspend in adult social care includes the 3.5 million. So otherwise, you end up with a double count of the 3.5 being in the undelivered savings and in the overspend. That's the answer. If that helps. Do you have a supplementary? No? Great, thank you. The second question is from Councillor Katie Grant. Do you want to ask your question?
Hi, thank you, Craig. My question concerns the likelihood of overspend within the adult social care budget. I just would like to ask, in light of the additional stresses that COVID and lockdown-related costs have brought to the budget, as well as other outgoings due to wage increases, is this not the right point to accept that there will be an overspend, rather than looking for ways to cut in a sector that's of such importance right now, and where insufficient spending could have very significant consequences for the most vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of the restriction that we live in is that we have to balance the budget in the year somehow. So at the end of the year, we will have to find ways to meet that overspend, and that doesn't. So that there's a kind of we're kind of straitjacketed into that in a sense. That said, we will. It's a difficult question, isn't it? So in terms of the end of the year, we will balance the budget, and we will set spending targets and savings plans for next year. Now that budget may include an overspend that we'll have met from reserves. So I'm kind of a bit confused as to what the question is. Well, should we just wipe out the overspend, or?
No,
yeah, well, we'll balance it in the end.
I mean, we've got an unusually high level of reserves, so I guess, consistent with what you've just said.
Well, we haven't actually. We've got reserves, but most of those reserves are allocated to existing projects, aren't they? So we don't have an unusually high level of reserves, general fund reserves, that we can spend on funding social care. And we also know that adult social care in Bristol is quite expensive. Comparatively, we compare ourselves to others, so there is something wrong in there somewhere, and we'll continue to look at technological sources and other investor save type things that you talked about earlier as ways to mitigate that. but that does mean badging savings against our, by far and away our biggest budget. Do you have a supplementary? Thanks. Can I ask for any comments from Cabinet members? Helen, yeah.
I feel I perhaps ought to say something, and that is to hopefully convince you that we're doing both things at once, which is trying to contain the additional spend, but also carry on our transformation journey, which is hard to do, because in some ways you need a kind of pause to be able to plough on with transformation. But we've got to do both things, and we've got to manage them. And frankly, the long promised sustainable solution for adult social care from the government is still not on the horizon. The increase in national insurance, most of that money, apart from the fact that also gives us another financial burden in paying that ourselves, but it doesn't bring about a sustainable change for adult social care. So we still, against the context of the additional COVID pressures and the workforce pressures and so on, we're still trying to transform the services and do the right thing, so that that my earlier report about We Work for Everyone, if we can carry on with doing things like that, it gives better outcomes for our service users and it costs us less. So that's a win-win, but trying to do that in the face of this storm is quite difficult.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Does anyone else want to comment? No? Thank you. Okay. Well, thank everyone for their comments. And in terms of the decisions being made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Agenda item 14, me again. Request to tender Bristol City Council casualty, property and additional covers and insurance. This paper asks Cabinet to approve the procurement of a new contract for property, casualty and additional cover insurances for a term of 3 years with an option to extend for additional 2 years. This insurance package covers the Council for a range of issues such as property damage, employer's liability, public liability, engineering inspection and insurance. Given the potential for large exposures under these categories, it's crucial we take steps to procure insurance policies for these areas, ensure we're getting good value for money in a changing insurance market. It's another example of a paper which doesn't attract much in the way of member or public comment, but it is crucial to the Council's operation. In terms of public forum, we've not received any public forum statements or questions on this item. Do any Cabinet members want to comment? No? Any insurance? Sure? Okay, thanks. Well, I'll thank everyone for their comments. Yeah. In terms of decisions to be made today, yeah. No. In terms of decisions to be made today, I'll approve the recommendations as set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. It's one of those, if you get it wrong, everyone will know, but if you don't, no one notices. Right, agenda item 15, supported family framework and contracts extension. Tom, can I ask you to introduce this report?
Thank you. So the Supported Family Accommodation Open Framework Agreement and its contracts were set up initially in April 2018 and is due to expire on the 31st of March next year. This request is being made that we extend the open framework and its contracts for a further 4 years to ensure that we can continue to provide accommodation and support to homeless families with support needs. Supported accommodation helps to address the support needs of families whilst providing a safe and more secure home, and this helps families increase their resilience and helps them stay in their home, having multiple other benefits including on mental health. We've carried out research into the support needs of families in emergency accommodation and found that most households had support needs which aren't being met. These include things such as budgeting, access to benefits, and also employment, education and training. Our needs analysis has also indicated that there are increasing numbers of families coming through with multiple complex support needs, and these include mental and physical health, issues around domestic violence, sexual violence, child sexual exploitation or trafficking, and forced marriage. Our records show that between April 2018 and March 21, we have had 4,128 families present at our customer services point, of which 1,839 of those were assessed as being eligible for assistance. There's also further indication that following the end of the temporary eviction ban, we are likely to see an increase of the number of families becoming homeless, and most of these families will have their well-being impacted and end up in costly emergency accommodation and all the uncertainty that brings. This provides a clear justification for the work we want to do for procuring additional supported family units, and this paper would authorise the awarding of contracts for up to 100 additional units. and to encourage additional providers to join the framework to help us work towards meeting the demand for this accommodation. The other thing I'd just like to briefly draw attention to is the principal reason, from sort of looking at the paper, the large difference between the costs of emergency accommodation and supported family accommodation costs. And for us, this is due to housing benefit subsidy loss. Emergency accommodation is not supported accommodation, and housing benefit regulations do not allow for the full cost to be claimed back from the government. Whereas in supported family accommodation, we only pay for the support services, and the providers are responsible for the rent and the eligible service charge costs for which full housing benefit is available. We're committed to reducing our use of emergency accommodation wherever we can, both from a cost perspective, but also from just a social human perspective, of giving people more security and support. So if this proposal is agreed by Cabinet, it means we can support more families to move on from homelessness and start to turn their lives around. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. We've had no public forum questions or statements on this one. Do any Cabinet members want to comment? No? Okay, great. Well, thanks, Tom. Can I hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will be displayed on the screen?
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations to set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thank you. On to agenda item 16, the Gambling Act Policy Review. Can I ask Councillor Nicola Beach to introduce the report?
Thanks, Craig. I'm bringing to Cabinet today the review of the gambling policy, which we have a statutory duty to review and renew every 3 years. The policy actually gets determined at full council in December, so this is on its journey to full council, coming to Cabinet today. I guess we could have a whole debate about our views about gambling in this chamber, but that unfortunately isn't really what the power of this policy has at a local authority level. And so people might be familiar with kind of pressures on government to reform gambling nationally, and there's a good Labour Party group on that actually, if anyone wants to go and look that up. And I myself have very strong views about the need to reform gambling at a national level and change national policy on that, particularly around the digital space. But alas, at a local authority level, we just simply don't have that power. And so what we'll see in this policy, if any one of my Cabinet colleagues or members here today have read it, is it is remarkably similar to the previous policy. And actually, it is the most that we are able to do as a council. So I'll leave it there. I know there's a few matters of public forum, and if anyone would like to join me in lobbying government to change, to reform gambling policy, then they're more than welcome to. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Nicola. So we've received one statement and 3 public forum questions on this item. The statement is from Councillor Barry Parsons. Is Barry here? No?
Unfortunately, he was unable to get here today at the last minute.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. I mean, we've received the statement and would have read it. I think it was also certainly Barry who had the first question, both the questions actually. So he'll get written responses to that one. We also had a question from Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend. No? Okay, great. Well, they'll get written replies anyway. So can I open it up for Cabinet members? Any Cabinet members wish to comment? No? Okay, well, I thank everyone and hand back to Councillor Beach to take the decision which I support and will now be displayed on screen.
Thank you very much, Craig. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Agenda item 17, purchase of iPoint ticket machines. Can I ask Councillor Don Alexander to introduce the report?
Thank you, Craig. This paper asks Cabinet to approve the procurement of 14 iPoint ticket machines for the Cribbs Causeway Patchway Metrobus extension. Metrobus is an important part of Bristol's public transport network. The service has carried well over 4 million passenger journeys since 2008. The iPoint ticket machines allow passengers to buy tickets and smart cards at every Metrobus stop. Since their introduction in 2018, there have been over 800,000 individual transactions made via the iPoint ticket machines. Eagle-eyed Cabinet members may well wonder why Bristol City Council's Cabinet is giving permission to purchase ticket machines that will be used in an extension of the Metrobus service that is located entirely in South Gloucestershire. This is not simply a sign of our commitment to facilitating greater public transport connectivity across our region, though we do have that, as we continue to build the case for a mass transit network. it's also an outworking of the contract we entered into in 2016 to administer the iPoint ticket machines across all Metro bus stops in the West of England area. I'm therefore pleased to report to Cabinet that South Gloucestershire Council will cover the cost of the works to install the ticket machines, so the net cost to Bristol City Council will be nil. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. We have received a public forum statement from David Redgewell. Dave, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, it's just the point I made earlier, really, is the fact that we need network, and I think it would be more prudent if we'd purchased the iPoints and the information for the South Bristol Loop at the same time. It would have saved us extra money, possibly allowed us to let that contract. So it's really just saying that we need to look at the South Bristol Loop. I welcome the North Bristol line, as everybody knows, but I really do want to see progress. And we probably just missed a trick there with South Gloucestershire, Bristol and Wecker, not to purchase and put in place the South Bristol link, which is vitally needed, and possibly need an extension up to Sevenside and Cabot Park as part of it. But we need to really make progress on the South Bristol Loop. But I certainly do welcome Bristol Parkway to Patchway, and it certainly is, it's going to serve the arena as well, which of course partly is in Bristol. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I don't know if, Don, did you want to come back on that? Are you happy?
Thank you. Well, it's an opportunity for me to point you all towards the West of England Supported Bus Services Survey. So if there are any services, excellent, if there are any services you feel that the West of England should be supporting, which are not currently supported, or indeed are now supported, but you feel they should continue, then this is available online or in paper, and that's any services that you feel should be supported. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Don. Do any Cabinet members want to comment? No? Okay.
I
Ashton,
just wanted to say I was one of those eagle-eyed Cabinet members who spotted and wondered, why are we paying for this? But it's good to know that we've wiped our face with it.
It wouldn't have got any further if it did. I'll now hand back to Councillor Don Alexander to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Don. So we're now on to agenda item 18, which was to be the carbon reduction project paper, but the item has been withdrawn. This paper was about accepting funding from the Green Homes Grant, but this bid was unsuccessful, and therefore we are removing the paper. Right, so on agenda item 19, Ambition Community Energy Wind Turbine. This is one from me. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, this item was added to the forward plan under APR 15 and the relevant heads of scrutiny have been informed. We did this because of the importance of supporting the Lawrence Western community with this exciting energy proposal. Can I also remind Cabinet members that the following agenda item contains exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session. Cabinet members and the members of the relevant Scrutiny Commission have been given access to these appendices. This report asks Cabinet to approve the grant of a 30-year lease to Ambition Community Energy to enable the development of a wind turbine at Severn Road in Avonmouth in Lawrence Western Ward. Cabinet will be aware that the Council has been working with Ambition Lawrence Western since 2016 to develop a community wind turbine to generate renewable energy for the local community and to sell the electricity that it generates. We estimate that the project will save around 50,000 tonnes of carbon over 25 years. Projects like this are an innovative way for us to demonstrate our commitment to a just transition. It allows us to drive forward the decarbonisation of our city's energy systems while supporting the development of our local communities. All surplus profits from the project will be used to implement the Lawrence Western Development Plan. This paper therefore seeks Cabinet approval to grant the lease for the site at an undervalue as set out in the valuation report so that construction can commence. So we've received one statement from Councillor Martin Fodor. Martin?
Yes, thanks very much. I'm making a statement to support this, and I'm delighted that the Cabinet is set to approve this arrangement to lease the site. I declare an interest. I'm part of Bristol Energy Network. I have been for well over a decade, and Ambition Lawrence Western and their turbine is part of that network of community energy projects. It's a really valuable project, so I'm glad to support it. And it's evidence of what's been developing in the city for well over a decade, of grassroots, community-led projects that provide the maximum benefit and the maximum variety of outcomes for communities through owning, controlling, initiating and innovating in local energy projects, like the solar farm in Lawrence Weston, for instance. And it's something that
10 seconds left, Martin.
Yeah,
right?
sure. And it supports many other objectives, and it wasn't done because the groups necessarily wanted to promote energy. They wanted to tackle fuel poverty, promote regeneration. I'd just like to say I would hope the council will actually make an explicit commitment to support and enable and positively make it easy for more and more of these projects to develop. They're the best value in terms of any energy projects we can have in the city because of the way they promote social, economic and environmental well-being. So please support it, but please make it a pattern for the future that the council is a positive partner. This might easily have fallen over 5 years. You look at the funding matrix and the hurdles. It's not easy. Many groups would have given up on the way. Yeah. They've done it. Let's support them and make sure more can do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. It's also a win for city funds who have obviously invested throughout the life cycle of the project as well. I don't know, Nicola, if you want to comment on any of that.
Just to say that, as you'll know, Martin is promoting and supporting the continued transformation and progression of community energy in the city is absolutely at the backbone of our energy strategy. So this is something that, as an administration, we've been committed to. And I'd love to take all the credit. Obviously, I've only been in the job for 5 months, so I can't possibly. But I've been totally blown away. I'll reserve the rest of my remarks for when we get to talk in a minute.
Thanks, Nicola. Okay, thanks. So now we'll hand over to any cabinet members who wish to comment. So, Don.
Yeah, I'll take a bit of credit. This is in my ward, so I just want to congratulate. Well, first of all, I want to remember a very courageous development control committee. Actually, I did happen to chair it, but I just want to remember that as well because that was a tough day. I want to thank Power to Change as an organisation, City Funds, as you've already mentioned. Bristol City Council officers have worked really positively with Ambition Lawrence Weston to bring this through. And of course, Ambition Lawrence Weston themselves and the people of Lawrence Weston who have created what is a landmark community energy project which has received national recognition. And it will produce enough electricity to power more than the number of houses in Lawrence Weston itself. And that's tremendously exciting. So day of celebration for us in our ward. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. We should probably thank David Tudgy as well for his limitless, if you forgive the pun, energy and phone calls and everything else that he does. Can I ask any other cabinet members to comment? Nicola,
Yeah, I just want to make the point kind of coming up and out from Lawrence Weston in terms of the role that Ambition Lawrence Weston have played in instilling confidence in community energy full stop in the city. Last week we were at the watershed for the community climate action plan session where they brought together the 6 communities that have all put together their community climate action plans, and obviously Ambition Lawrence Weston being one of those 6. And listening to Donna talk about the journey that they've been on is as impressive, if not more impressive, than their giant wind turbine that they now are going to have in Lawrence Weston. And I just wanted to quote Donna because it really stayed with me for the whole day, actually, about this idea of just doing the next right thing. So as an organisation, she said, I look back over 5 years for a bunch of ruffians in a community hall, and now here we are supplying the council and the homes in Lawrence Weston with the energy that they need. And I think that actually if there's one thing to take from this experience, it's just about doing the next right thing and keeping on going, and before you know it, you've changed planning policy in the city of Bristol and you've got the biggest onshore wind turbine in the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Anyone else want to comment? No? Brilliant. Well, in terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendation as set out in the report and which will now be displayed on the screen. Woohoo! So, next agenda item 20, Bedminster Green Framework Area. I'll introduce this item and take the decision on behalf of the Mayor today. Bedminster Green is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform 5 brownfield sites to create a thriving new sustainable community, delivering over 2,000 new homes, including affordable and student accommodation, new commercial spaces, a multi-storey car park, improved sustainable transport connections, flood mitigation and enhanced public spaces. It's quite a detailed report with several recommendations which look to bring forward those aims and allocate funds for infrastructure to make that possible. Since the framework we designed in 2019 with local people, some of the sites have gained planning permission. 180 new homes and 815 square metre commercial space at Plot 2. Plot 3 received a resolution to grant permission for 819 bed spaces in June 2021. Plot 4 has permission granted for 295 new homes, including 21 affordable. The report explains the position around Plot 5. To secure vacant possession of Plot 5, as per our agreement with the developer, 2 leaseholds need to be acquired. A new car park constructed on Little Paradise and a new cafe and parks depot need to be developed in Victoria Park to enable social farms and gardens to be relocated to a refurbished Victoria Park lodge. Securing vacant possession of Plot 5 will result in 5 businesses being displaced, and our economic development team will support the affected businesses wherever possible. The report asks Cabinet to note the deal and the responsibilities to deliver on conditions. It also notes that an agreement has been reached for tenants of the greenhouse to be moved to a refurbished Victoria Park lodge. Much of the paper focuses on the strategic transport assessment and the resulting highways works for the area. The A38 is a strategic corridor used by the Metrobus and links the city centre to South Bristol and Bristol Airport. Therefore, the works will improve and modernise the bus stops in the area, as well as improvements to cycle routes. The report notes with frustration the huge cost for any alterations for the train station entrance, so rightly focuses instead on improving the area overall and directing passengers there. 2 small parcels of unregistered land within the boundary of the highway works, which will need to be acquired to deliver enhanced bus priority, widen pedestrian footways and maintain access, and the recommendations set out delegations needed for this. One of the really exciting aspects is the restoration and resurfacing of the River Malago, which will improve flood risk management in the area, but also help improve the ecological value of the site. To enable this, the Council must acquire some land as well as a contribution from the current owner, and recommendations include those powers. We're in a much better position to understand all these aspirations since March 2019, and so the detailed cost means we can now allocate the correct amounts needed. The paper explains the potential sources of funding in detail, as well as other routes should they be unsuccessful. I'm pleased to recommend to Cabinet the allocation of funds along with 6 million strategic seal already allocated. Bringing new life to the area will reconnect it to the rest of Bedminster, helping to support East Street's traders and revitalise the local economy. It delivers on our challenge of building hundreds of homes in an active travel area, and I'm pleased to see progress continuing. So we've received 2 public forum statements and 3 questions for this item. The first statement is from Roger Gimson of Bristol Walking Alliance. No, it's not here. The second statement is from Tony Lloyd on behalf of the Friends of Suburban Railways. Tony, are you here? Yep. Tony, you have a minute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wonder how many of you actually been to Bedminster Station. It's not exactly a scintillating experience. Besides lack of facilities, it's not disabled compliant, and also the entry to the station goes on the wrong side of the track. It goes to the Windmill side instead of the Bedminster side. So, the ideal thing would be to have a new access through to the north side onto Bedminster, Plot 5 in fact, which leads me on to a slight problem in that the council commissioned Jacobs to look at this very problem about the access and could it be done? Could the Bedminster station be organised? They came up with the answer, no, it was too difficult, but they didn't have the access to information that Network Rail is probably going to 4-track Bedminster and Parsons Street all the way back to Temple Meads. And in which case they would have to completely remodel Bedminster Station. And in that case, if remodelling by Network Rail could easily be
10 seconds left, Tony.
Accommodate a northern access. The only problem there is, although we could have a northern access, the new framework agreement or development potential for Plot 5 puts a great big building number 3 right across where any northern access from Bedminster Station would go. So I would like very much, if possible, to flag this up and say that perhaps we ought to rethink the building number 3 and that it could be changed, perhaps not completely scrapped, but changed so that there will be a channel for a northern access to Bedminster Station.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for your comments. So we've received a number of questions, actually, but the first one, 3 questions. The first one is from Councillor Lisa Stone. Lisa, can you ask your question?
Oh, hi, hello, good evening, thanks very much. I got a funny feeling that in your rambling, well, not rambling in your statement, rambling, it's a long night, you've answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Basically, in order to secure vacant possession of Plot 5, Bedminster Green, the sustainable wooden build, the greenhouse, which is a CEDAW good design, will not remain obviously in situ. And I think you've already suggested that it will be moved to Victoria Park, from what I just heard, maybe not. This is a unique building, which is both sustainable and it can be moved. It can be flat packed, basically. It can be flat packed into a back of a van and just carted off somewhere. There's no clear proposals for its future within the Cabinet report, apparently. My question is that this valuable building, which is also made from sustainable wood from Bristol as well, so it's got a historic value within the city, and that's South Bristol, could it be preserved and moved to Victoria Park just to put that cafe and other amenities within Victoria Park that is so widely needed? That's pretty much my question. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So, firstly, no. What I said was that they'd operate from the refurbished Victoria Lodge in Victoria Park rather than moving the building. The building can't be moved. I'm told it's too big, so it can't be moved there. However, we are carrying out a structural survey to understand whether it is sound enough to be moved to any alternative location to be protective. So we're waiting the results on that, and we'll happily come back to you on that when we know. Do you have a supplementary?
Sorry, I didn't hear. You said it was too big to be moved where?
To move into Victoria Park.
Right, okay. Victoria was quite a big park.
Yeah, I guess it's the loss of green space within the park, isn't it? To house a bit. I mean, it's a huge building, isn't it? I know it. I used to live there nearby.
Yeah, I know, but the Friends of Victoria Park have suggested that they would like the greenhouse to be placed in Victoria Park. So if we consult the community, we could possibly put it into Victoria Park.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll carry on looking at whether the building can actually be moved at all, and then we can take that on. The next 2 questions were from Ed Plowden, but I don't think he's here. I haven't seen him, no. Okay, well, he'll get written responses anyway. So I think that's it for the public questions. Can I ask any Cabinet members who wish to comment? Tom?
I'd just like to state my support for this and also the wider regeneration that's going on in the area. It's going to see a significant number of houses delivered, as well as huge improvements to place as well. So it's thinking about all those wider infrastructure issues as well. So it's going to be really good, and there's going to be a real mix of what's available there, including affordable housing, student accommodation as well, which is important. We're providing that too because of the pressure otherwise that can come onto the private rented sector.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. Anyone else want to comment? Nicola?
I was just going to bring in the River Malago works into this and just kind of say thank you that we are progressing with those from an ecological perspective. I think kind of the opportunity to deculvert anything in a city is one that we should grasp with both hands, as we have done as part of this plan. So actually when the day comes when, and I think let's do this in the winter, not the summer, or we'll be a bit disappointed with the trickle, but when we actually when the culvert is removed and we can sort of actually restore the river and bring back a whole piece of history for people in Bedminster, I think is going to be really powerful. And not to mention from an ecological perspective, actually just help the Bedminster Green itself become more biodiverse. I mean, it's a green space that is well respected and well loved by people locally, and as I'm sure Lisa can testify to, but actually it isn't necessarily the most biodiverse at the moment. And so by bringing the water back, I think everyone locally will just get something different and something special there. So thanks very much. Thanks, Greg.
Great, thanks, Nicola. Does anyone else want to comment? Helen?
Well, in answer to the question about who's actually been to Bedminster Station, I use it quite often. It's very handy to use from Temple Meads to Bedminster if the train fits in with you coming back from London. This is pre-pandemic, obviously I'm talking. But I think the one thing that would make Bedminster Station more viable and alterations there is having more use of it, so bringing more people to live in the area and people recognising that it's so close to the city centre and accessible to Temple Meads is the one thing that's going to make any future plans for the station much more interesting to potential investors.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, go on, yeah, Nicola.
Just as you say that, Helen, it reminds me about how we ended up in this situation in the first place with an area of growth and regen around Bedminster, and it is absolutely about those modal areas where there are train stations. So we looked at Parsons Street, we looked at Bedminster Station, and it's easy in time to forget kind of why it was that Bedminster Green and White House Lane were two of the areas where we said actually this is a place where we can densify and where we can encourage people to travel sustainably. But it is exactly the point you just made then about the long-term sustainability of these smaller stations around our city. So yeah, it's a good one to raise. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Nicola. So thanks to everyone for their comments. In terms of decisions to be made today, I approve the many recommendations as set out in the report and which will now be displayed on the screen. So the next item we're taking is actually agenda item 22. So we've had to slightly change the order so that we can take the exempt session last. The exempt paper last, sorry. So agenda item 22, the Director of Public Health Annual Report 2020 to 2021. And I'm going to ask Councillor Ellie King to introduce the report.
Thank you. This report is a yearly requirement of every Director of Public Health to examine and summarise the state of health within their local populations and for it to be published on our website so that all may have access to it. It is Christina Gray's second report for Bristol. Her first focused on mental health and well-being, and today's report focuses on the impact of COVID on the city and reflections on that most vital of functions, breathing. This topic encompasses not only correlations between COVID and other cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, both current and historic, but crucially looks beyond disease-informed evidence as the primary indicator of good health. It takes a holistic, preventative approach, recognising the range of socio-economic and environmental factors that determine the disproportionately high levels of preventable mortality in the most deprived areas of our city. Addressing this stark imbalance of health inequality continues to be the priority for public health in Bristol. This is evident in the priority we have placed in interventions around healthy weight, reducing smoking, increasing access to green spaces, promoting active lifestyles, and of course, encouraging vaccination uptake, amongst others. It is an interesting and insightful report and written in a very accessible style, so I urge colleagues and fellow councillors and members of the public to make time to read it. In particular, it sets out 9 areas for future action to help make Bristol a healthier place for us all to live. We all benefit from a healthier, more equal Bristol. I'd encourage everyone to consider how we can embed the report's calls to action across all different facets of life and work in the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. So on that, we've had 2 public forum statements and 3 questions. The first statement and question are from Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend, who I don't think is here. So we will move on. The next statement is from Councillor Gary Hopkins, who's also got 2 questions. So you've got one minute for your statement, Gary, and then we'll go to your questions.
2 things. Firstly, there was questions, and I think the statement to some extent follows on from the questions, because I've been noting the very low vaccination rates in some parts of the city. Our overall rate is below the national average, but you know that happens with a lot of other cities. But as an example, Barton Hill, the rate there, 47.9% second vaccine. Upper Eastern 50.4, St Paul's 54, and by comparison, my own ward, which is not the most privileged in the city, 76.4. Now, what I didn't see in the report was an urgent reference to this, and it is at the moment quite important that we actually move up vaccination rates. Still less than I see any clear plan as to how this is actually going to be addressed. And whilst a lot of the other issues are of interest, at the moment, COVID is an overriding concern, surely.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Did you want to ask your 2 questions? Or do you want to ask your first question and get an answer?
The question was to ask for these to be put out, these stats on vaccination rates, infections and deaths by ward, or if not by ward, by the equivalent, which are probably super output areas, if we don't have them by ward exactly, so that people can actually see what the problem actually is. And it is quite severe. Am I going to get that table, please?
So you can, if you go into the government's national COVID website, you can put in a postcode and it will show you a geographical area or a ward, and it will show you the data on the vaccination uptake in that area and of the number of cases and the number of deaths in that area. So that data is available.
I'm aware of that, and that's where I've quoted these figures from. National Statistical Office are very good in providing this. That's what I was looking for was a clear statement so that we could get comparisons for this city, because basically we, by having areas where there's very low vaccination rates, we are making not only those areas and people live there, but surrounding areas that much more vulnerable. And a clear statement, that's what I put the question in for, so that we could get that in tabular form, which is easily accessible for people.
Well, so amongst there's a whole host of things we're doing to pursue vaccinations in every area. We've just issued a joint partnerships Bristol position statement emphasising that Bristol expects people and organisations to be responsible and safe and considerate despite being in this deregulated space that we're currently in. And we don't have any regulatory powers, so all we can do is pursue that. But we're also doing pop-ups in places like the Sweet Marts in Easton and Freshers Week at UWE and a whole host of places where the vaccination needs to be uptake and the uptake needs to be higher. We've had walk-ins in the Chinese supermarket, in IKEA, and where the communities have actually taken the response lead on that, and then we've been there to facilitate the vaccinations. So we are looking at those deprived areas, but one thing I'd urge as well is a bit of caution when we're comparing ward by ward comparisons, because there can be a host of reasons why one area has more cases of COVID and one doesn't. There might be a higher elderly population in one area, and that can be resulting in higher numbers. And also, conversely, that can be a reason why there's more vaccination uptake in that area as opposed to a younger area, because the COVID vaccination process has been staggered in age groups. So the younger age groups, in wards where there's a more younger population, we will see less vaccination uptake than in higher. And that goes for comparisons between in all the southwest areas as well. It might be more helpful to compare us to another city rather than BNSSG because of the different demographics.
I'm aware that there's a slight drag for some of the younger, densely populated areas, but people with higher number of youngers. But that doesn't account for figures as low as 47%. It really is quite frightening. And what I've not seen any evidence of is effective communication and use of local champions to actually make certain that communities who are hesitant about the vaccine actually, therefore, are persuaded to lose their fear.
Is there a question, Gary? Is this a supplementary question?
So basically, why are we not doing this? Why are we not effectively using local communication systems to improve the percentage rates in some areas where it's low?
I think we just heard that we are. I think that's what. Yeah, go on, Asher. Do you want to come in? Yeah, go on.
Sorry, Tip, but I really don't know where you've been. You must have been sleepwalking through the last 18 months, because we have the public health team, BNSSG, and all of our partners across the city have been working hand over fist to work across all of our communities, doing really targeted work and support around vaccination and getting the right information, debunking all of the myths, etc. The last thing I would have expected to hear from you, and this is the one thing that came out at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, is where we're trying to set up different communities against each other, who's been vaccinated more than each other. It's not about that. And as Ellie said already, the demographics play out. We have a huge amount of students come in. You will see a huge influx of numbers going up, and vaccination. It swings and roundabouts. So I would kind of just chill slightly when it comes to you trying to compare apples and oranges, because you can't. And we are making every effort. In fact, we have done a stupendous job, I think, in terms of the work of the community development team, public health team, all of the community ambassadors that we have across our communities. So you need to read the stuff that is sent out to you, because you wouldn't be asking this question if you actually we're better informed, and we are communicating with the city.
Thanks, Asher.
And just to add to that, in evidence of that, Bristol's vaccination programme has been shortlisted for the HSJ Race Equality Award. So we are being recognised for the work that we're doing on inequalities in terms of COVID.
And as a member of my local COVID task force that was set up by the community development team, it's been absolutely excellent, and we've managed to target almost street level action when you're seeing problems happen and as they happen. So absolutely brilliant work by public health and community development, I thought. Okay, thank you. Do any cabinet members wish to comment on the paper more broadly? Helen.
Well, just because I'm so wound up by Gary's questions, really, but just to add to what Ellie and Asher have said and that you've said about the data. I can't remember if you've been to the briefings, but the data has been cut in every way possible so that we can really drill down about which communities haven't taken it up. For example, when it was cut along ethnic lines, that revealed one set of issues, but then the team also divided the data into language use and recognised that a lot of the Eastern European communities weren't taking it up. So that work was targeted. And the targeted work has been, as Ellie said, has been recommended for a national award, but it's also reflected in the changed priority that the Health and Wellbeing Board had, which was to make our kind of detailed target. So, of course, we've got an overriding target about reducing health inequalities, but our target this year is about using vaccination take-up as a measure of health inequalities. So that those figures are all being tracked all the time, and it's not just they're being tracked and somebody's going, oh, that's interesting. Targeted actions are taking place as a result of it, and I just don't know how you've missed this, Gary.
I'm reading the report and it's not in the report.
Right, thank you everyone for your comments. I don't think this is a report just for noting, isn't it? So Cabinet notes the recommendations are set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen, and this is the end of the public part of the Cabinet. Thank you to Cabinet members for attending. The next Cabinet meeting is Tuesday, the 14th of December 2021 at 4 p.m. Cabinet members will now adjourn to the Bearer Room to consider the exempt report. Other members of Council are welcome to observe if they wish to do so. Thank you all.